Greetings and salutations, everyone. Azeroth has been faced with many adversaries over the years, and while many have been dealt with, many are still out there waiting to be dealt with for good. With Shadowlands' conclusion on the horizon and our return to Azeroth imminent, I thought it would be best to talk about some of those threats. Ragnaros the Fire Lord was one of the 4 elemental lords of Azeroth. It was his summoning from his fiery plane of the Firelands that made the very earth around the Eastern Kingdoms turn molten. We had actually dealt with him a long time ago in his domain on Azeroth, in the Molten Core, where he had forced the Dark Irons who had summoned him into our world into working for him. While he was killed, he wasn't killed in his own plane, which allowed Deathwing the Destroyer to bring him forth to aid in the burning of Mount Hyjal, which if done would bring forth the Hour of Twilight, the destruction of our world as we know it. But once again, we brought Ragnaros down, and this time he was slain for good in the Firelands. However, many years later, a Dark Iron known as High Justice Grimstone had attempted to revive Ragnaros, but ultimately failed. While it remains a mystery on whether or not Ragnaros will truly be revived, it would seem they've abducted the current Fire Lord Smolderon and intend to use him to revive their master. So, while Ragnaros himself is not a threat yet, we should still look out for his return and his cult. The once trade prince of the Bilgewater cartel, Jester was the scummiest of goblins out there. He had outright enslaved or tried to enslave most of his people, but was stopped by the former warchief of the Horde, Thrall, and a band of goblin rebels. Despite his misdeeds, he was allowed to keep his title as Trade Prince for a time, and he would bring his goblins into the Horde. After the end of the final Legion invasion, a substance that Gallywix was all too familiar with, known as Azerite, had appeared all around the globe. Taking advantage of the situation, Gallywix encouraged Sylvanas to use such a mineral for her plans in the Fourth War. Gallywix quickly became a heavy supporter of Sylvanas and her horde, and would ultimately choose to remain loyal to her till the end. He'd retreat from Orgrimmar once the rebels were victorious in driving Sylvanas out as warchief, thanks to the efforts of Saurfang, leaving his seat and position as Trade Prince open to be filled by Gazlowe. Gallywix's fate for some time remained unknown, but he was seen within Tazvaresh, the Veiled Market, likely making a deal of some sort with the brokers. While Gallywix isn't a talented warrior, caster, or even builder, he is quite the cunning businessman, and that's one of his most threatening traits. He's definitely the vengeful type, so it's only a matter of time when he'll strike back, potentially even becoming the new leader of the Venture Co. company, as their own leader fell during the Fourth War, or maybe he's forming his own new cartel. The greed of Gallywix truly has no bounds. An organization known for a long time, the Scarlet Crusade was formed after the fall of Lordaeron to combat the Scourge. However, it would become corrupted by the infiltration of the Dreadlords, who would use it for their own ends. The Scarlet Crusade would become extremely zealous and destructive in their quest to purge the world of undeath, believing all besides them to be impure and to be amongst the damned that walked. Constantly, they would be dealt with by the Alliance and Horde, and constantly they would rise again. The Scarlet Crusade continue to exist and are now under the name of the Scarlet Brotherhood, where they currently still oppose the Alliance and the Horde, and preach propaganda and claim they have a Menethil with them. With the current political climate centered around both Lordaeron and Stormwind, with the Regent Turalyon, I believe with time, the Scarlets will reveal themselves once again and prove to be a problem for all of Azeroth. Syntharia Sinestra, the prime consort to Deathwing, the Earth Warder, was the one who gave birth to the many notable black dragons, like the two great siblings Onyxia and Naufarian. It was she who experimented on her own brood and the nether dragons that she was provided by the Dragonmaw orcs of Outland, to create a new and dangerous brood of dragons known as the Twilight Dragonflight. Unfortunately for her, her experiments turned on her, resulting in her own end. As Deathwing broke the world around him, creating the cataclysm that would scar Azeroth for the years to come, a newly reanimated Sinestra would do her work below, giving birth to an army of Twilight Dragons at the behest of the old gods. But once Cho'Gall, the leader of the Twilight's Hammer at the time, was killed, Sinestra would be forced to finish what the ogre had started. Despite her own power and legion of whelps, the heroes of Azeroth would triumph, and Sinestra would meet her permanent end. Or so we thought, as her own spirit would be seen guiding the remnants of the Twilight's Hammer and the reborn Twilight Dragons in Deepholm. There remain several Twilight eggs within the caverns of Grim Patrol who are still hatching and still creating destruction. Sinestra clearly remains a threat even after her own demise, yet again, which only means trouble for us, as the Twilight's Hammer and the Twilight Dragonflight continue to have a leader who cannot be killed, even after the fall of Deathwing. When Garrosh Hellscream was transported to an alternate timeline by Kairos and Rathian, where he prevented the drinking of the blood of Manroth and created the Iron Horde, he had created another problem altogether. Yrel was but a prisoner of the Iron Horde who had been dealt a heavy hand by the Shadowmoon clan, who took her sister and many of her people away from her, all but to conquer their world in a path of bones and skulls. Even the Prophet Velen's life was claimed in order to stop Ner'zhul from wiping them out. From there, though, Yrel learned to harness her beliefs and her strengths to become a powerful Exarch and lead her people against the Iron Horde. But unlike on our Draenor, the Draenei were not wiped out, and were able to thrive on the planet together with the Orcs, who had a change of heart and joined in unity to remove the Legion from their world. But Draenor would still meet a grim fate, and would slowly die, and the two races that had once found unity would blame one another for it. Not just that, but the Draenei in their newly found peace would dig in deep with their religion with the Light. The Light pushed the Draenei into the belief that all races in Draenor should worship the Light, which of course some of the Orcs outright opposed. Thus the Lightbound were formed and led by Yrel, causing a war between the Orcs and the Draenei to resurface. Durotan himself would meet an end, and Warchief Grom's fate remained unknown. While the majority of the Orcs, now dubbed the Mag'har, fled to Azeroth with the aid of both Eitrigg and the Horde Champion, the Lightbound still remained a threat back in this alternate reality, and it is only a matter of time that they'll come from the same dark portal that the Iron Horde had once used to spill into Azeroth, and bring their zealous beliefs with them. The Elder Crone and leader of the Grimtotem tribe, Magatha for the longest time dreamed to be the true leader of the Tauren people, and believed that Karen Bloodhoof to be a fool and unfit to rule. From this, Magatha would find the means to get rid of Karen from the role of High Chieftain. When Thrall left to become a stronger shaman to aid against the coming cataclysm, he left Garrosh in the role of Warchief. Magatha pledged to aid Garrosh, seeing him as the perfect means to dispose of Karen, which would come to pass. Karen challenged Garrosh to Mak'gara after a group of druids were slaughtered and left his friend Hamul in a near-death state, which Karen blamed Garrosh for. Before the two dueled, their weapons were blessed each by a shaman of their own choosing. Garrosh chose Magatha, who poisoned Gorhal and did not bless it. One single strike from Garrosh with a poisoned weapon would kill Karen and allowed Magatha to strike out at Thunder Bluff. Things would not go accordingly though, as Bane Bloodhoof was saved by one of her own people, Javan Grimtotem, which would allow Bane to bolster his forces and eventually take back his city from Magatha and her ilk. Despite everything that she had done, she would not be killed by Bane, and instead her totems were broken and she was exiled from their lands, along with all those who still followed her. After this, Magatha was bent on obtaining power, and she would find this in the Thousand Needles. And with the aid of the hero of Azeroth, she would obtain this power through the Doomstone, a relic that the Twilight's Hammer intended to use to destroy the land around them. But Magatha herself would take this relic and have it for a time. When the Burning Legion returned, they somehow managed to obtain this Doomstone, and Magatha would be forced to ask for the Earthen Ring's aid to get it back, granting it to her with some hesitation. Though they were successful in reobtaining the stone, and even used it on the Burning Legion on the Broken Shore, they would not give it back to Magatha, as it was simply too powerful to be in the hands of a mortal, especially her. Magatha would return to the Maelstrom and watch over the stone for a time. During the Fourth War, Azerite elementals would create chaos around the Shaman Order Hall, but the Doomstone would remain safe thanks to Nomundo. Magatha herself was nowhere to be seen though. Magatha is certainly no friend or ally to the world, and will one day resurface to try and get back at those who deprived her of what she believes is rightfully hers. A very enigmatic entity, Xal'atath is rumored to be a missing piece from Yasharaj or one of the other old gods located on Azeroth. Whatever she is, she was once trapped within the blade of the Black Empire and was potent with the powers of the old gods. Throughout history, she has exchanged many hands and created chaos wherever she went, but has often gotten away. Her most recent holder was a Shadow Priest and champion of Azeroth who had used her to combat the Burning Legion and absorb the very Dark Titan's essence when his blade had struck into Silithus. After such a feat, she laid dormant for a bit, only to turn up when the Naga assaulted the shores of Zandalar and Kul Tiras, where she was once again found. Through this, she would task the hero of Azeroth, whoever they be, to stop the Nagas scouring over the planet. In this process of saving Azeroth, she would possess the body of a high elf and go on to free herself from her own blade by making a deal with N'Zoth the Corruptor, by offering her many dark artifacts that the Naga were planning to use, as well as the champion too. The last we see of her is her disappearing into a void portal, claiming that she'd meet us once again. While the blade remained empty, it still proved useful to the likes of Sylvanas, Azshara, and even Rathian. The Blade of the Black Empire was used within Nyalova to deliver a hefty blow to N'Zoth, giving us a chance to take him out. And once again, the artifact would disappear, possibly holding a piece of N'Zoth, or was simply destroyed in the process. Xal'atath, wherever she is, whoever she is certainly a dangerous and manipulative force that is just waiting to return. Perhaps she'll bring a legion of old gods and void entities to lay claim to Azeroth, or perhaps she'll do it herself from other means. Regardless, Xal'atath most certainly will be back someday to stir trouble. Neltharion, son of Deathwing, had once toiled away at trying to create a dragonflight that would hold the power of all 5 of the other dragonflights. These were known as the Chromatic Dragonflights, which would never truly surface as each experiment with them had failed. However, the last of Neltharion's work, just after he had died, would be the sole member of such a flight. Chromatus was his name, and he was given life by Benedictus, known as the Twilight Father at this time. Chromatus was so mighty and so powerful that even the combined might of all of the dragon aspects at their peak could not kill him. It was only through the joint efforts of Thrall to represent the black dragon aspect did they succeed in thwarting Chromatus. But the creature simply would not die. Not truly anyways, as whatever dark magic brought him into this world would prevent them from taking Chromatus out. Instead, the creature was held inside a prison within the Nexus, where a representative from each dragonflight would watch over him and his inanimate body. Chromatus could and very well one day return, as he was not truly destroyed and merely imprisoned within the Nexus. All it would take is for someone or something to reanimate him back from his slumber. Given how the dragon aspects were made extremely powerless after their battle with Deathwing, Chromatus would be a force to be reckoned with, now that the forces that toppled him are weaker. The very one to bring forth the Burning Legion into our world, Queen Azshara was once the leader of the Kaldari people, and one of the strongest mortals on Azeroth, rivaling the likes of Archimonde and Kil'jaeden in power. She had grown fascinated by Sargeras and his demonic army, and it was this fascination that led to her own downfall. From this came the War of the Ancients, where the likes of Illidan, Malfurion, Tyrande, Broxagar, demigods, etc. took the fight against her and her empire, which resulted in the destruction of the Well of Eternity and the great sundering that broke the continents apart. The water around her and her empire began to collapse on them, and Azshara could not save her people from the crushing depths. So a deal was made between her and the old god named N'Zoth. From this deal, the Naga were born, and Azshara and her servants were saved from their dark fate. But from this, they were made into servants for the Old Ones. The Naga became one of the most conflicting adversaries on Azeroth, and later even on Outland. Together, N'Zoth and Azshara worked together towards freeing him from his prison, but Azshara, never truly liking this sort of partnership, schemed her way out of it. Through trial and many errors, she planned to kill the old god using the Blade of the Black Empire, after it was given to her by Sylvanas. But the champions of Azeroth proved too much for her, leaving her at the old god's mercy right after freeing him. In the realm of Ny'alotha, N'Zoth attempted to make Azshara a far more obedient servant, but his plans would fall flat, and Azshara would lend the blade to Prince Rathian to use in taking N'Zoth down. Queen Azshara would then escape through a portal and has yet to be seen since. Where Azshara went off to is a mystery, but she claims that there is a vacant throne that she intends to take. Whatever this throne may be, or what it connects to, is also a mystery. It could be connected to the Titans, the Void, the Fel, possibly even the First Ones. But we can bet that Azshara will return someday, and whatever she's after will not be good for us. Lord of the Burning Legion, once champion of the Titan Pantheon, Sargeras is one of the strongest entities in all of Warcraft, and where most of the conflicts came from. Starting off as a very noble and righteous champion for the Pantheon, Sargeras was charged with removing the demons across the cosmos. This proved to be a difficult task, as the demons would simply be reborn within the Twisting Nether. Instead, Sargeras would combat this by imprisoning the demons to a planet known as Mardoom, which would make it more difficult for the demons to stir trouble by being stuck there. However, Sargeras' quest to purge the demons quickly became a minor duty, as the cunning and manipulative Nathrezim, or better known as the Dreadlords, would be bathing in chaotic energies of a nearby Titan, slowly being corrupted by the Void. The Dreadlords would tell Sargeras that these Void entities, the Old Gods, should they succeed in corrupting a Titan, all would be lost, driving Sargeras to slay the planet and all who inhabited it. Sargeras would try to speak of this dark truth to his fellow Pantheon, but they dismissed it and were more troubled by his killing of another Titan. Upset by his siblings' response, Sargeras left to take matters into his own hands. He would use the very demons he had imprisoned and slain to combat this void by destroying all in his path, believing that one day life will be restored someday after the void had been purged from the universe. Something that did not sit well with the rest of the Pantheon, who tried to stop Sargeras, to which they ultimately failed. Sargeras then went on to recruit those who would follow him on his quest to wipe out life from the known regions of the universe, recruiting the several other alien races like the Eridar, who were led by Archimonde and Kil'jaeden, who were two of Sargeras' most trusted and valued lieutenants, taking their planet and the Titan of Argus as his main base of operations. However, the denizens and the people of Azeroth proved too much for even the Burning Legion, and Azeroth quickly became a treasure that the Lord of the Burning Legion desperately sought. Sargeras tried and failed with many attempts to take the one final Titan with the likes of the Orcs and the Scourge. Both failed him. Sargeras was running out of options and time, and even his commanders were falling to these mortals now. So Sargeras planned to use his very own siblings to bring forth his crusade by turning them all into the Dark Pantheon. But this Dark Pantheon would never come to pass, and Sargeras would be imprisoned along with all other Titans on the seat of the Pantheon. His last-ditch effort was stabbing his sword into the very heart of Azeroth, a sword that is still there on the planet. While it did not kill the planet, it left many wounds on it, thus ending Sargeras and his Burning Legion. But Sargeras has thus far not been killed, and as far as we know, the Titans and Illidan are doing their best to keep him firmly in his seat. It's not really a matter of if Sargeras will escape, it's only a matter of when. And who knows what trouble he might bring when that happens. He could reunify the Burning Legion. He could perhaps turn the works of the Titans against Azeroth herself. He may even convince the Titans and Illidan that his cause wasn't wrong. Who knows truly? What we do know is that Sargeras is simply one being that you do not want to mess with, and his return is one that is simply inevitable. But what do you all think? Who do you want to see the most again? Do you think we'll see any of them soon? Let me know all your thoughts and questions down below. Subscribe if you like these videos, support me on various other social medias, or you can join us on the Skull Shorties Discord, where we talk about all sorts of stuff. And if you like me enough, you can support me on my Patreon, like these amazing folks here. But until next time, guys,